Hola, esta presentación número 8 se llama Otras consonantes del español. Vamos a hablar de ch y f y j y s y th y r. So we're finally getting into that tongue roll that many of you have asked me about. Empezamos con algo muy fácil, el sonido ch, y no hay nada irregular. Este sonido ocurre en inglés también, como en hatchet, y en español no hay ningunos problemas con ortografía tampoco, porque siempre la letra che. Hay unos diccionarios nuevos del español que dicen que che no es una letra separada, pero para mí, en esta clase por lo menos, ch es sonido y letra del alfabeto. Pero no hay nada en particular para practicar porque es fácil. Lo mismo con F, el sonido igual en inglés y no hay ningunos problemas con ortografía porque siempre es la letra del alfabeto F. Un poco más complicado es el caso de G. En español hay 3 posibilidades cuando hablamos de ortografía. Una posibilidad es la letra J y tiene el sonido J en palabras como jamón, Javier, mujer, bajo, reloj. A veces necesitamos escribir la letra G, pero solamente antes de I o E. Por ejemplo, gitano, gente, agitar. Y finalmente, tenemos la letra del alfabeto X, pero solo ocurre en palabras indígenas, especialmente lenguas de los aztecas. Pero a veces tenemos X que tiene el sonido como en México o Oaxaca. Cuando hablamos de pronunciación, no hay mucho, pero vamos a hablar un poco más de este sonido y sus variaciones de alófonos cuando hablamos de dialectos. Ok. Ahora vamos a hablar de los alófonos del fonema S. But I'm going to break down and talk in English here because this is a tricky thing. So in Spanish, the fonema S has two members of its family, dos miembros de la familia. Now, it's very important that we start using brackets to talk about allophones and stay with the slashes to talk about phonemes like we did before. So the phoneme S, notice that's between slashes, tiene dos alófonos, and those dos alófonos now have brackets. So the phoneme S or S could be pronounced like you think it is, like a S. So like the snake again, no vibration in your throat. But sometimes it's pronounced Z. And I will tell you for a fact, nobody told me any of this when I was learning Spanish, so this may be new for many of you. So you would think in Spanish, every time you see the letter S, it's going to make a S, unvoiced fricative sound, but that's not the case. There are situations where it actually turns into the voiced version, so the allophone Z with the brackets around it. And when does that happen? Before another voiced consonant. I will give you some examples in a moment. So again, the phoneme S, and in this case, the letter would always be S in Spanish. Sometimes you have to pronounce it as a Z, the voiced version, when antes de una consonante sonora. Every other time, en todos otros casos, it's going to be pronounced like you think it would be, like a S, which is unvoiced. But here, look at these examples. We have the word es in front of gordo. We have it in front of mexicana. And we have it in front of bodas. Now here's where you're going to have to remember your phonetic chart. Are these instances of the phoneme S followed by a voiced consonant or not? So you have to remember if it's voiced or not. You can always do the fingers on your throat, check if you're not sure. But G from gordo, that is indeed a voiced consonant, G. So when we have the word es before it, we really don't want to say es gordo. Of course you can say that. In fact, most English-speaking people learning Spanish do say es gordo. But what we should be doing for a more authentic Spanish accent is change that S to the sound Z, so the allophone that's voiced. So you really want es gordo. Same thing with mexicana. Is a voiced sound. You can test that out if you'd like. Definitely voiced sound. So when es comes before it, you don't want to say es mexicana. You want to say es mexicana. Same thing with B. You'll remember from your chart that B is a voiced consonant. So here you wouldn't want las bodas, you would want las bodas. Now notice the last S in the word bodas is normal because it doesn't come before anything, let alone a voiced consonant. So the correct pronunciation of all the ones on the top is gordo, is mexicana, las bodas. But all the situations down below, zapatos, hasta, rosa, the letter Z, you'll remember in Latin American Spanish or General American Spanish that we're using now, the letter Z is pronounced like an S. That's true here too, because it doesn't come before a voiced consonant, it comes before a vowel, the vowel A. Now with the word hasta, that phoneme S comes before T, but you have to ask yourself, is T voiced or not? You can check it out with your fingers at your throat, but what you will find is it is unvoiced. It is not a voiced consonant. So your phoneme S is going to stay the unvoiced or voiceless version of S. So you have hasta, just like you thought. Now the next one causes some problems for English speakers. It looks so much like the word rose, and if you say that out loud in English, rose, now put your fingers on your throat and hold out that last sound, rose, you'll notice that it's the voiced version. But here, the S comes before a vowel. It definitely doesn't come before a voiced consonant, so it's still going to be S. So the correct pronunciation in Español es rosa, not rosa. It's rosa. Go back for a moment to the word zapatos. Both the letter Z at the beginning and the letter S at the end are pronounced in exactly the same way. They are both the phoneme and the allophone, S. One of the things that's important about keeping this distinction is we have words that differ only, or we have sounds, I should say, that only differ by one aspect. For example, the p of pecas and the b of becas. Those are minimal pairs because the p and the b are the only sounds that change. But with the p, it is unvoiced. So what do we do with that S before pecas? We keep it unvoiced, just like the P that comes after it. So las pecas, just like you thought it would be, las pecas. But with becas, that word begins with B, which is voiced. So instead of saying las becas, we really want to say las becas. Certainly not exaggerated to that extent, but I always find that exaggeration is useful in making a point, especially at the beginning. So with a little exaggeration, you'll have these contrastes, las becas, las becas. But don't turn the last S of becas into anything other than S, because you'll remember that in any dialect of Spanish, even Castellano, the letter S here would not become voiced because it doesn't come before anything. So it definitely doesn't come before a voiced consonant. So one more time, that contrast, las becas, las becas. The next one, also a little exaggerated, esposo, esbozo. Now, esbozo, here's where the real problem shows itself. Esposo, nothing weird about it. You've got two letter S's, and they both make the sound S. The first one in esposo stays unvoiced because the P after it is unvoiced. The second S in the word esposo, it comes before a vowel, so it doesn't change to anything other than S. So you got esposo. But now look at esbozo. Notice that the letter S here, since it does come before a voiced consonant, it becomes Z, so es. But the Z that comes between two vowels after that, the boso, that letter Z is never, ever, ever anything but the sound S, the unvoiced S, unless you're talking about Spain, which we are not. So yeah, what I'm saying here is in General American Spanish, in this word, esbozo, the S sounds like a Z, and the Z sounds like an S. So one thing to file away, in any dialect, but let's just stay with General American Spanish, the letter Z will never, ever, ever make the sound it does in English, which is Z. So the next one, you've got los codos, because K is unvoiced, so that S before it stays unvoiced. But los godos, G, G, is a voiced sound, so the S here changes to the sound, the voiced sound Z. So you've got los codos versus los godos. But again, the letter S at the end of godos stays the same. It doesn't come before anything. Ok, contrastes con el inglés. No hay ningunas diferencias en la producción de S y Z. We have both of those sounds in English, so there's no need for you to do anything special to learn the correct Spanish pronunciation of those allophones. One is S and one is Z. Fine, no problem. El problema es que hay unas diferencias en la distribución de los dos alófonos. So here, to be crystal clear in English, all of the examples I have here, rosa, zapatos, presidente, there is not a single Z sound, the voiced fricative there, voiced fricative. In rosa, as we already talked about, don't let English get in your way with rose and you transfer it over to rosa. We want rosa. Now the next one, zapatos. Remember, we're totally ignoring Castilian Spanish from Spain. We're talking about General American Spanish, Latinoamérica, y el Caribe. That first initial letter is the letter Z, but what does the letter Z do in Spanish? It's just an S sound in General American Spanish, of course. The last letter of that word, zapatos, is an S. So that is also S. Then take the word presidente. That is a prime example of how English can get in your way when there are cognates. Because you look at this and you really want to say president, because that's what we say in English. Say that kind of slowly to yourself. President in English, president. You've got a Z, the voiced version there. But you don't want to transfer that over to presidente. You want presidente. Now the trickiest part is really well illustrated by the word zapatos. So what I'm saying here is that the initial letter Z sounds like an S, and the final S also sounds like an S. So in this row of 3, you never hear a Z sound, ever, ever. You got rosa, zapatos, presidente. Y como les dije, es un poco difícil, no es imposible, pero es difícil aprender el uso correcto si no eres originalmente de España. We have had students from Mercyhurst go and study in Spain or live there for a while, and even they don't completely pick up when to do the th and when to do the s. Now we've had students that have lived in, former students who've lived in Spain long enough that it really is more natural for them now, but that's a tricky one to try to learn if you didn't grow up speaking it. And that would go for a native speaker of Spanish as well, not from Spain. Okay, let us be really clear about this. La ortografía, or the spelling. The first one, the GAS, I'm trying to say General American Spanish, but sometimes I say Español Americano General, EAG, both of those are the same thing. So with General American Spanish, o sea, de Latinoamérica, the letter S, the letter Z, and the letter C, when it comes before an I or an E, all of those are going to make the same sound, which is S. The rule below it for Spain, just quickly here, because we're going to expand on that when we talk about dialects, but in Spain, if you have the letter S, you still have the S sound, just like in Latin America, so you would see sí, soy de España, but if you have any letter Z, no matter where it happens, or the letter C before I or E, then you have theta, but only in Spain. So let's concentrate right now only on General American Spanish. You got the letter S, you got the letter Z, you got the letter C. If it comes before I or E, every single one of those is going to give you the same sound, S. I did make a note there that every once in a while you'll have a word, sometimes it's a borrowed word from indigenous languages, sometimes it's just another situation, but sometimes an X makes a S sound as well. So in extraño, if that were written phonetically, pretend that word, extraño, pretend it's a phonetic transcription. If that were true, it would be extraño, because the symbol X, as we know, makes a, but we don't want extraño, we want X. So what you see there is a K and an S. Now, xilófono, if it were phonetically written, it would be xilófono, but we don't want xilófono. So this is not the symbol X, this is the letter X. And in this case, it makes the S sound, so it's xilófono. Now, Xochimilco, indigenous word from Latin America, that initial X also makes an S sound, Xochimilco. You won't see a lot of situations where an X turns into an S, but I want you to be familiar with that. Okay, un poco de práctica. Here's what I want you to do on your own time. If you print out the PowerPoint as slide versions, so you have 2 or even 3 or 4 slides on the same sheet of paper, then you can write it right there. Or if you've already been making notes in a notebook, a separate notebook, that's perfectly fine. You could do some cut and paste. But with all of these, your first step, mark all the cases of the phoneme S. So we're not talking about how you pronounce it now, just the phoneme S. Mark every single one. Then use the method of your choice, be it on the computer, you could use highlighting, you could use different colored font. If you're doing it in writing, you could use different color ink. So for each one of those, you've marked every single case of the phoneme S. Now remember, that could be the letter S. It could be the letter Z. It could be the letter C before I or E. So you've got all of those marked. Now, again, with whatever method you choose, above those situations of the phoneme S, I want you to use the bracketed form of either the unvoiced S or the voiced Z. So again, that S and Z are both members of the S phoneme family. So I'll do the first one with you. You've got an S between O and A. Just mark that. Then you've got a Z between I and O. Then you've got a Z from the verb rezar between two vowels. In Russo, same thing, S between two vowels. We repeat it backwards, and every single case there, Russo, resa, rosa, riso, every one of those should be underlined. But now, are they all going to actually be pronounced? Remember that allophones are the representation of what actually comes out of your mouth, your specific pronunciation. Are any of those going to be the voiced Z sound? Look back at your notes and ask yourself, when do we have a Z sound? The trickiest thing to remember for English speakers is that will never happen with the letter Z. You have the letter Z in Spanish will never make a Z sound. So when do you have the Z sound? As we learned before, that would only happen before a voiced consonant. So every single situation in number one is either the letter S or the letter Z between two vowels. So none of them come before a voiced consonant. Therefore, every single one of them is pronounced as the unvoiced S. So rosariso, resa, ruso, ruso, resa, rosariso. Every single one. Now let's do two together as well. First, let's just indicate all the phoneme S situations. So you've got the first sound of son. You mark that. You have the sound at the end of buenas. You have the third S at the end of noches. Then you've got an S at the end of los, one at the end of chicos, and one at the end of guapos. Some of these S's need to be pronounced like a Z, the voiced version. Which ones? How about the one to start off with? Well, you just ask yourself, does that come before a voiced consonant? No, it comes before a vowel, so that stays S. But at the end of buenas, you're going to make the decision based on what comes after it. The noches. Put your fingers on your throat and say, N. You should hear some vibration there because N is voiced. So the S at the end of buenas, that comes before noches, that S at the end, needs to be pronounced as a Z, so buenas noches. Again, exaggerated, but you'll get my point. Buenas noches. Now at the end of noches, is it the same thing? What comes after it? A P. Is P voiced or not? It is not. So that S at the end of noches stays as the voiceless S sound, so noches para. Then at the end of los, what comes after it is the sound ch, which is voiceless, so the S will stay. But the S at the last of chicos comes before G, which is a voiced consonant, so that one is going to change into the voiced version of Z. So let me read this for you, quite exaggerated, so you hear the difference. Son buenas noches para los chicos guapos. So all across the row, you've got an S that stays an S. Next, end of buenas, you've got an S that turns into a Z sound. End of noches, S stays the same. S at the end of los, before chicos, stays the same. But at the end of chicos, that one changes to Z because G is voiced, and the last one, end of guapos, doesn't come before anything, so it stays the same. So here's what you have. Son buenas noches para los chicos guapos. Now that's a ridiculous exaggeration. No native speaker or even a good Spanish learner would ever sound like that. But physically, if you exaggerate, you can feel the difference. You can hear it in your ears. So I always recommend, if you're having issues with it, do some exaggeration and then you can back off. Now that you know this, however, some of you may have been told this as you were learning Spanish, but I know I was not. Now that you know about it, though, listen to native speakers. After you listen to them for a while, I'll bet you catch this. One word you'd hear a lot is, many of us pronounce mismo, but we really want mismo because is voiced. So just start listening to native speakers. Just see if you can get that S's that have turned into Z sounds. So that's a little tricky. All right. One that's a little bit tricky, but not as much, the Y sound. If anyone happens to go undergraduate school to study phonetics, which, hey, you never know, I've had students do it before, the original International Phonetic Alphabet uses a J, the letter J, no hat, just a J, for the sound Y. But I was trained with this American phonetics symbols. So even though the whole point of the International Phonetic Alphabet was to have just one symbol per sound, the Americans decided that they wanted to do it a little bit differently. So in my training, the Y goes Y. Now, one reason I like that is it matches up a lot better with the letter Y. But again, and ignore this if you don't go on to graduate school, but your letter Y symbol might be a J as you're learning it. So la familia Y, Y phonema. Notice that phoneme Y between slashes, very important. Pero la familia de Y tiene cuatro alófonos, cuatro miembros de la familia. So now you're using brackets because you're talking about allophones, the specific pronunciation of the word. It can differ by whether the letter or where the sound comes in a word or someone's particular dialect. But the first one is the same sound as the phoneme, Y. So it's just Y, 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 as in yo. The next one, and when I write it by hand, this J has a hat that looks just like the Z and the S's hat, rather than looking more like a tent. But sometimes it's hard to find that symbol in the insert symbols. So just picture that J with a hat, just like the hat that S and Z wear. But that sound is J, as in the English judge. Say that word in English, judge, J, J, judge. You got that sound twice in the word. In English, you've got the letter J to start with, but then a G for the second instance, judge. Now the Z with the hat is a fricative, but it's voiced. So you want to say Z. Do we have that sound in English? Z. We do. You might not be used to looking for it, but in words like pleasure or treasure, pleasure, treasure, pleasure, treasure, that's that sound, Z. And the last one is the voiceless or unvoiced version of that same fricative. So this one is sh, like you're telling someone to be quiet. So all of these sounds, Y, J, Z, sh, all of them son miembros de la misma familia, Y. A quick concept here, free variation, variación libre versus complementary distribution, distribución complementaria. What we have here with this situation is called variación libre. Se puede intercambiar los alófonos. So any given Spanish speaker could freely alternate between these two. There are some native speakers who would use the Y sound for all of this example. So yo me llamo Yolanda. You've got the Y for yo and Yolanda, but the ella at the beginning of llamo, same sound. So if you were to use the Y in that first bracket, what you'd be saying is I'm representing the sound yo me llamo Yolanda. The J with the hat, like judge, a person could say yo me llamo Yolanda. Yo me llamo Yolanda. The Z with the hat, the Z, and this is particularly true in the south of South America, especially Argentina, is the Z, like in pleasure, yo me llamo Yolanda. that probably sounds strange to your ears if you don't have any exposure to Argentinian Spanish. More detail with that later, but yo me llamo Yolanda. And then the S with the hat is simply the unvoiced version of that same thing, as in shh, trying to tell someone to be quiet. So you get yo me llamo Yolanda. So you might have a native speaker that picks one of those and stays with it. But sometimes native speakers will kind of just flip them around. So it could be yo me llamo Yolanda, or yo me llamo Yolanda, or yo me llamo Yolanda. So with variación libre, it's kind of a mismatch. Some native speakers will pick one and stay with it. Other native speakers alternate. Either way, it doesn't change the meaning of the word. That's why all of these, as different as they sound, really think about the differences in the sound now. If you repeat after me, you've got y, j, sh. Those are all very different sounds, but they're all part of the y, the y phoneme family. So a person from Mexico listening to someone from Argentina saying this sentence, the Argentinian would say, yo me llamo Yolanda. And the Mexican Spanish speaker would say, well, that's an interesting accent, but I know what you said because that's just a dialect difference in what I would normally say yo me llamo or yo me llamo. Same thing the other round. The Argentinian would understand the Mexican speaker. So all of these, as different as they sound, no matter how you pronounce it, they're all part of the phoneme y. Then we have distribución complementaria. La definición: un alófono ocurre en ciertas situaciones y otro alófono en otras situaciones. This is where we just talked about the z and the s. So you've got the two sounds here, and they were both part of the phoneme s. But the z could only happen in certain situations. It could only happen when the letter s came before a voiced consonant. So the second one here, the distribución complementaria, that one follows rules. If it's this situation, you say z. If it's this situation, you say s. And that would hold true for all dialects. But the variación libre, which is the one that goes with this particular phoneme, it's pretty much a free-for-all, mix and match. With ortografía, letras del alfabeto, dos posibilidades, Y o ella. So if you have the letter Y or the double L, those are all going to be the phoneme y. This was just my note about if you go on to study more in-depth phonetics, that y that we're using would actually be a J symbol, but I'm used to the American version. What I think is tricky here, how do you know the difference between a phoneme and an allophone? Well, check out the yo me llamo Yolanda. If I said yo me llamo Yolanda because I'm from Argentina, you still would understand me because what I'm saying is simply an accepted dialect difference version, just as yo me llamo Yolanda would be. So I want you to say y and j really quickly again. J, y, j. In Spanish, those are simply allophones of the same phoneme. They're mix and match. Certain speakers might do one, some speakers might do the other, but no matter what, if a person said yo me llamo Yolanda or yo me llamo Yolanda, Spanish speakers would understand each other. So those are all part of the same family. We have the y sound in English too, and the j sound like in judge. But are those all part of the same family? Remember that if you have different pronunciations due to dialect or due to personal preference or due to where something happens in a word, if a different sound changes the meaning of that word, like casa and pasa, then that's a minimal pair. They all sound the same. But in English, y and j, well, are they part of the same family or not? Here's your question. Do you want to send your kid to Yale or do you want to send them to jail? So in English, the y and the j are totally separate phonemes because there's obviously a difference between Yale and jail. But in Spanish, those same two sounds, and they're just as different from each other in Spanish as they are in English, but in Spanish, they're all part of the Y family. They're all allophones of the Y phoneme. Okay, R. I have some ideas about teaching how to roll the R, but in my years of experience of teaching, it seems to be something that some people pick up quickly and some people don't. But we will do our best with this. So, la letra del alfabeto R, so just one letter R, siempre es el fonema R, con una excepción. Es cuando la letra R ocurre al principio de un grupo articulatorio. So if you have the letter R in Spanish, it's always going to be the phoneme R unless it begins a breath group. It's very important to remember that I'm not talking about starting a word, I'm starting a breath group. So in these situations, pero, caro, araña, puerta, dorado, hablar. All of those have one letter R, and they all sound like the phoneme R. But when that same letter R, as I said, occurs at the beginning of a breath group, al principio de un grupo articulatorio, then it's actually the rolled version, the vibrante múltiple R. So in the word Ramón, even though there's only one R, if we assume that's the beginning of a breath group, usually the beginning of a sentence, let's say for ease, it would be Ramón. Same thing with Ricardo, Raquel, and rico es un adjetivo. But in the sentence, mi hermano es Ricardo, that R, yeah, it still comes at the first of a word, but we're talking about a whole breath group, a whole group of sound. Because remember, we speak in sound, not in words. So here, the R from Ricardo does not come at the beginning of your breath group. That's all the way back over to the word mi. So again, if that one letter R, could be a person's name, could be a place, like the rinconcillo, if it comes at the beginning of a breath group, it's going to be the double, vibrante múltiple R. And then, easier, if you have the double letter R, it's always going to be the rolled version, vibrante múltiple. So, perro, carro, ahorrar, querría, enterrado. I will exaggerate a little bit. Perro, carro, ahorrar, querría, enterrado. So this one, you don't have to decide if it changes based on where it happens in the word. A double R is always going to be the R with the line over it, the vibrante múltiple. So for people who are having a real difficulty with this, these are some tricks that I've picked up from students over the years. One of them is if you say water otter in English, and for those of you who took sociolinguistics class, notice that none of those three T's makes a T sound at all. They're all D, water, otter. Not with British English, Naomi, I should be clear on that. But in American English, you say water otter, water otter, water otter, water otter, as fast as you can, right together. Water otter, water otter, water otter, water otter, water otter. And many students claim that after doing that enough, the R, the rolled R, just kicks in at some point. Now this could be a little bit controversial. You might have native speaking friends or teachers or even family that would not approve of this, but this is something I'm going to call a compromise. So let's say with the word verde, let's say you have a really hard time even making the single R sound like Spanish. Let's say you have influence from English. Pretend that word were English and you'd get verde, verde. That's a very English R, verde. We don't want that in Spanish ever. So if you said the English words verde, say that together several times. Verde, 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 verde. It's not exactly the word verde in Spanish, but to most native speakers, verde sounds a lot better than verde. Same thing with the word pardo. A native speaker would much rather hear pardo. If you say that together, pardo, 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 pardo. It's not exactly pardo. So it's not our end goal, but it might be a good middle ground if you're having issues with it. So I contend that a native speaker would rather hear pardo than pardo, and the same with pero and caro. It would be better to say pedo and cado instead of pero and caro. And then the word frio. If you broke it into 3 syllables, which it isn't really, but you said fadio, say it fast, fadio, tengo fadio. It's not quite right, but it's better than frio. Then I found a web page that has some other ideas about how how to roll your R. If it comes down to a case where you just are not able to do it, then you'd still be able to do it in writing on a test or a homework. And if you could find some way in your own pronunciation, and this is a middle ground while you're learning the correct pronunciation, if you could just do something a little different with your double R's than you do with your single R's. So worst case scenario, you could say pero and perro. Definitely not correct Spanish, but the most important thing right now is to just bring your attention to the fact that the r and even the r, the vibrante simple, vibrante multiple, can be difficult for English learners. So these might work for you or they might not. Just some suggestions. Aquí tengo unas palabras para practicar la diferencia entre R y R. In the first line, you don't have any situations of a double R, an R letter, nor do you have a situation where the R comes at the beginning of a breath group. Now here, we're just talking about beginning of a word because they're individual words. But in the top row, there's no situation where you need to say R, the rolled version. You just want R. So try this. After me, espero. Hablara. Oro. Ara. Let's say that's completely impossible for you. Let's just say at this point you're saying espero, hablara, oro, ara. You definitely don't want to sound gringo like that. So just as a middle ground while you're learning the correct pronunciation, what would happen if you put a D where those R's are? Especially if you made that D dental like you do in Spanish. So put your tongue in the back of your teeth and say the D, the. What if you put that there instead of the R's? Espero, hablada, oro, ara. Correct? No. But it's better than espero, hablara, oro, ara. Let's go down to the row that begins with the word rico. All of them in this line, they're at the beginning of a word, yeah, because we're just doing individual words at a time now, but let's just say they're beginning of an entire breath group as well. So all of these single written letter R's are going to be the vibrante multiple. So I'm going to do this with some heavy exaggeration. We got rico, rosa, ramo, remo. One more time after me. Really roll that R if you can. Rico, rosa, ramo, remo. Most native speakers would not be quite that exaggerated. But all of those get the double vibrante multiple because the single letter R is happening here at the beginning of a breath group, specifically at the beginning of a word because we only have one word at a time. And then the last one I want to do together before you practice on your own is the line that begins with perro. So after me, all of these are going to be rolled. Perro, corro, torre, arreglar. One last thing I want to mention, because it's something I've had problems with, it's something former students have had problems with, and I heard it for a very few of you on your initial recordings. When we learn as English speakers to roll those Spanish R's, sometimes we are so excited, so proud of ourselves that we want to show it off, but we show it off in situations where it doesn't belong. So if we go up to that first line, if I'm all excited because I can make this rolled R, I might want to put it everywhere, like espero, hablar, orro, arra. But that is incorrect. And why does it matter? Again, minimal pair, but, pero, dog, perro. So you really do want to work towards that difference. So practice this on your own, and that is the end of talking about las consonantes.